The sound that broke the silence in Grayhaven Manor was not a Christmas carol. It was the sharp metallic crack of a boiler valve failing beneath the west staircase. At 6:17 on Christmas Eve, snow pressed against the windows of the mansion until the world outside disappeared. The lights flickered once, then twice. In the library, Billionaire Eveline Ashcroft sat alone beside a 12-foot tree that no one had finished decorating, watching the fire burn down to red coals. There were 42 bedrooms in the house, a ballroom large enough for 200 guests, a dining table built for 26. Only one place had been set. 2 miles away, Caleb Rowan was driving an old service van through the storm with his 7-year-old daughter wrapped in a blanket beside him. He had been promised 3 hours of emergency work and enough money to keep the heat on in their apartment through January. He did not know the woman at Grayhaven had ordered the gates locked. He did not know her family had abandoned her after taking control of the company she built. And he did not know that beneath the unfinished tree sat a broken wooden music box that had not played in 11 years. By midnight, Caleb would find Eveline trapped in a dark elevator. By morning, his daughter would ask one question no adult in that mansion had ever dared to ask. And before the next Christmas, the woman who believed everyone eventually left would have to decide whether to risk standing beside the 2 people who had refused to go. If you believe showing up can matter more than having all the right words, take a moment to like this story and tell me where you are listening from. Then stay with me, because the smallest sound in that silent house was about to change 3 lives. Caleb first saw Grayhaven Manor through a gap in the blowing snow. For most of the drive, there had been nothing beyond the headlights except white air and the dark suggestion of trees. Then the road curved, the wind eased for a second, and the mansion appeared on the hill like something built to outlast weather, wars, and the people who paid for it. Gray stone, tall chimneys, windows glowing in only 2 rooms. Tessa leaned toward the windshield. Her knitted hat had slipped down over one eyebrow. Is that a hotel? A house? For one family? Apparently, she considered that with the seriousness she gave to all unreasonable facts. They must lose each other a lot. Caleb smiled despite the ache behind his eyes, probably why they put numbers on the doors. His phone had lost signal 10 minutes earlier, but the work order remained open on the screen. Emergency boiler failure. Ashcroft residence. Immediate response. Double holiday rate. The dispatch company had called while he was standing in the supermarket, deciding whether to put a bag of oranges back on the shelf. 3 hours of work could cover the electric bill, the overdue school lunch balance, and part of the transmission repair his van had been asking for in increasingly violent ways. He had said yes before the dispatcher finished explaining the weather. The problem was Tessa. His mother had left that morning to stay with Caleb's sister after a difficult pregnancy. The neighbor who sometimes watched Tessa had gone to Pennsylvania. Every other person he trusted was already at a Christmas table somewhere. So he had packed a blanket, 2 sandwiches, a thermos of cocoa, and Tessa's small canvas backpack. He told himself she could read in the van while he worked. He told himself the job would be quick. He had been telling himself manageable things since his wife died 3 years earlier. The iron gate stood open when they reached it. That should have been reassuring. It was not. A drift had formed across the drive, and Caleb had to take it with more speed than felt wise. The van climbed, slid sideways, caught, and climbed again. By the time he reached the circular courtyard, snow had packed itself into the wheel wells. No one came out to meet them. He checked the work order again. The contact name was listed only as N. Cole. No phone service. No gate code. No instructions beyond boiler access through the west service entrance. Stay here, he told Tessa. She looked at the house, then at the snow hitting the side window. What if you get lost? I am not going to get lost. You got lost in the hospital parking garage. That building was designed by a person who hated families. This one has more windows. He pulled her hat straight. Lock the doors. I will be right back. The west entrance was hidden behind a stone wall and a row of bare hedges. Caleb found it by following the smell of heating oil and the faint plume of steam rising from a ground-level vent. The door was unlocked. Inside, the service corridor was warmer than the courtyard, but not by much. Copper pipes ran along the ceiling. Old radiators clicked without producing heat. A row of brass call bells, relics from another century, hung above a wooden panel labeled with rooms that sounded like chapters in a forgotten book. Morning room, blue salon, winter library, south nursery. Caleb called out. No answer. He followed the pipe run toward the mechanical room. The closer he got, the louder the knocking became. It was not the steady complaint of air in a line. It was hard, irregular, dangerous. He shut the main feed valve, killed power to the circulation pump, and opened the panel. The sight confirmed what the sound had suggested. A pressure relief fitting had cracked, probably after a frozen return line forced the system beyond tolerance. Steam had soaked the insulation. Water spread across the concrete floor beneath the boiler. It was repairable, but not in 3 hours. Caleb took photographs for dispatch, then remembered he had no signal. He found the shutoff for the damaged zone and isolated it. The rest of the house might hold temperature if he could restart the secondary system. He was tracing the old diagram bolted to the wall when a woman's voice came from the doorway. Who are you? He turned. She sat in a black wheelchair framed by the corridor light. Her hair was dark and cut just above her shoulders. A cream sweater softened nothing in her expression. She held herself with such controlled stillness that the chair seemed less like the first thing to notice, and more like an object that had failed to earn her attention. Caleb wiped his hand on a cloth. Caleb Rowan, North County Emergency Mechanical. I was sent for the boiler. No contractor was authorized. He held up his phone. The work order came through at 5:23. Contact listed as Nathan Cole. Something changed in her eyes at the name, but not enough for him to understand it. Mr. Cole no longer works here. Since when? Since this afternoon. Caleb looked at the flooded floor, then back at her. The valve did not crack because he stopped working here. You can leave. I can leave the system isolated. That gives you heat in the east wing for maybe 6 hours, depending on the temperature drop. After that, the return lines could freeze. If they split inside the walls, you will have a much bigger problem. I said you can leave. I heard you. The answer irritated her more than open disagreement might have. Then why are you still standing there? Because the road is nearly closed, my daughter is waiting outside, and your house is losing heat. Those facts are currently more useful than your opinion of me. Silence settled between them. Caleb knew the tone had cost him the job. He also knew the job had apparently never existed. The woman's gaze moved to the tool case, the cut valve, the diagram he had already marked with a pencil. Your daughter is outside? In the van. You brought a child to a mechanical emergency in a blizzard. I brought a child with me because leaving her alone at home would have been worse. That is not a defense. No, it is an explanation. For the first time, her composure slipped. Not much. A slight tightening at the mouth, as if explanations without excuses were unfamiliar objects. A low boom sounded somewhere above them. The lights blinked out. The emergency strips along the floor came on red. From outside, faint through stone and storm, a car alarm began to scream. Tessa. Caleb grabbed his coat and ran. The courtyard had vanished beneath moving snow. He could barely see the van until the alarm lights flashed. A branch had fallen across the hood. Not large enough to crush the engine, but heavy enough to shatter the passenger side mirror and frighten a 7-year-old into pressing every button she could reach. Caleb pulled the branch away, opened the door, and found Tessa sitting rigid with the blanket around her shoulders. I locked it, she said quickly. Like you told me. You did exactly right. The tree attacked us. It made a poor decision. He lifted her out. She wrapped both arms around his neck, which she had not done in months. Behind him, the woman had followed as far as the covered entrance. Snow collected on her hair and shoulders. Bring her inside, she said. It sounded less like kindness than surrender to a practical problem. Caleb carried Tessa past her into the service corridor. "This is Tessa," he said. "Tessa, this is..." The woman waited. "Eveline Ashcroft." Caleb knew the name. Most people did. North Star Hospitality owned luxury hotels in 17 countries. Eveline Ashcroft had founded the company before she was 30, rebuilt abandoned landmarks into profitable destinations, and appeared on magazine covers beside headlines about instinct, discipline, and impossible standards. Then 3 years ago, a car crossed a median in heavy rain. Her fiancé had been driving. He walked away from the hospital within a week, and from their engagement within 3 months. Eveline disappeared from public view while the company continued under an executive committee led by her uncle. The articles called her recovery private. The word private could hide almost anything. Tessa looked at Eveline's chair, then at her face. "Do you live here by yourself?" "Tonight, apparently, that is too many rooms." Eveline's eyebrows rose. "Your father said something similar. He said rich people put numbers on doors so they do not get lost." Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. Eveline looked at him. "She improves most stories," he said. Clearly, the power returned with a groan through the walls. Somewhere in the corridor, a bell rang once, though no one had touched it. Caleb went back to the boiler. Tessa sat on an overturned crate with her backpack and drew while he worked. Eveline remained in the doorway longer than necessary, watching him bypass the failed zone and build a temporary pressure loop from fittings in his case. "That will hold?" she asked. "Until the replacement arrives." "And when will that be?" "The road's open, the supplier answers, and someone agrees to work Christmas Day. Choose any two. I can pay enough to get all 3. He tightened the final connection. "Money does not move snow." The sentence landed badly. "Money moves almost everything," she said. Caleb checked the gauge. Maybe that is the problem. Tessa's pencil stopped. Eveline's voice cooled. "Finish the work and leave when the road is passable." That was already the plan. He restarted the secondary pump. The pipe shuddered, then settled into a low hum. Heat began moving toward the occupied rooms. Caleb should have felt relief. Instead, he noticed the old service thermometer beside the door dropping again. "There is another failure," he said. "You just repaired it." "I repaired one. The west wing return line is frozen somewhere past this wall. If I bring the full system online, it could rupture." "Then do not bring it online. That leaves half the house without heat. Half the house is empty. Pipes do not care." He followed the line on the diagram. It ran beneath the central hall, through the old conservatory, and up toward the library. "I need access to the west rooms." "No. There are shut-offs inside them. Use another route." "There is not another route." Her hand tightened on the wheel rim. The refusal was not about pipes. Caleb had spent enough years restoring old houses to recognize when a locked room carried more weight than its door. "I can shut the whole system down," he said. "That protects the house, but leaves you with fireplaces and portable heaters until repairs are possible. Or I can trace the frozen section and save the system. Those are the choices." Eveline looked down the corridor toward the main house. "The west rooms have been closed for 11 years, she said. "Then tonight is already unusual. You mistake bluntness for permission, Mr. Rowan, and you mistake permission for control. The pipe is freezing whether you approve or not." Tessa glanced between them. "Dad says old houses are like old people. They tell you what hurts, but not always with words." Caleb looked at her. "I said buildings. You said both." Eveline turned her chair toward the lift at the end of the corridor. "Follow me." The main hall of Grayhaven was colder than the mechanical wing and more beautiful than Caleb wanted it to be. A broad staircase rose beneath a ceiling painted with pale clouds. Portraits watched from paneled walls. The unfinished Christmas tree stood beyond an archway, its lower branches bare and its upper half covered in white lights. Boxes of ornaments remained open on the floor. Tessa slowed beside them. Someone stopped. Eveline did not answer. They crossed to the west gallery. The air changed there. It smelled of dust, cedar, and rooms kept shut for too long. Eveline unlocked the first door with a key from the pocket of her chair. Inside, sheets covered the furniture. A line of framed photographs stood face down on the mantel. The frozen pipe ran behind the wall. Caleb opened a service panel hidden inside a bookcase and found the shutoff. Frost coated the copper beyond it. He closed the valve, then traced the line toward the next room. They moved through a music room with a closed piano, a morning room with dead plants, and finally a small sitting room at the end of the wing. This room had not been covered. A faded red blanket lay folded over the sofa. Children's books filled one shelf. On a low table beneath the window sat a wooden music box carved in the shape of a winter village. Tiny houses circled a central pine tree. A brass key protruded from one side. One of the carved figures was missing from the ring. Tessa walked toward it. "Do not touch that," Eveline said. The force in her voice stopped the child immediately. Caleb crouched beside the radiator. The frozen section was there, hidden behind a decorative cabinet. A draft came through the wall where old mortar had separated around a window frame. "This is the point," he said. "Cold air has been hitting the pipe for years. Tonight finally pushed it over. Can you fix it? Temporarily, the wall needs repair. Do what is necessary." He opened his case. Tessa sat on the floor a careful distance from the music box. "Does it play?" Eveline looked at the wooden village. "No, because it is broken? Because I do not wind it. That is different." The room seemed to grow quieter. Caleb wrapped the pipe with a heating cable and began sealing the draft. He did not look at Eveline, but he felt her attention move toward him as if waiting for judgment. He offered none. An hour later, the west line was warming. The boiler held pressure. The house would not freeze. The road, however, had disappeared. Caleb learned this when he walked back to the courtyard and found snow halfway up the van's tires. A county alert finally came through in a brief return of signal. All local roads closed until morning. Whiteout conditions. Emergency travel only. He returned to the hall carrying Tessa's blanket and the 2 sandwiches. "We are not leaving tonight," he said. Eveline sat near the dark fireplace. "There is a guest cottage near the gate. No heat. I checked the line on the system map. There are rooms in the east wing. We do not need a room. A sofa is fine. Grayhaven has 42 bedrooms. You will not sleep on a sofa to make a point. I am not making one. Then use the blue guest room. It has its own bath." Tessa brightened. "Is the door numbered?" Eveline looked at Caleb with the faintest trace of something that might have become amusement in another life. "It is now," she said. Number 1. The kitchen was the only room in the house that seemed designed for actual people. Copper pans hung above a wide island. A long pine table bore marks from years of use. The refrigerator contained enough food for a holiday gathering, a turkey prepared but uncooked, vegetables trimmed in containers, pies, cream, herbs, and a covered bowl of dough. "Someone planned dinner," Caleb said. "The staff planned dinner." "For how many?" 8. "Where are they?" "Elsewhere, that was not what I asked." Eveline's chair turned sharply. "My uncle canceled. My cousin took his family to St. Bart's. 2 board members developed scheduling conflicts. The staff asked to go home before the storm. I allowed it. There is no tragedy here, Mr. Rowan, only poor planning." Caleb looked at the prepared food. Poor planning did not leave 8 place cards stacked beside the silverware. "We have sandwiches," he said. "We will stay out of your way." Tessa opened her backpack and removed a crushed paper bag. "One is peanut butter. One is cheese because Dad forgot we were out of ham." "I did not forget." "You looked in the refrigerator twice." Eveline stared at the turkey. "The cook spent most of the day preparing that," she said. "It will spoil if it is not used." Caleb understood the offer hiding inside the complaint. "I can roast it. Can you?" "No. I thought this was a good night to experiment." Tessa covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Eveline's eyes narrowed, but the edge of her mouth moved. It was gone quickly. Caleb cooked because there was food and because activity gave the room rules. Tessa washed carrots at the sink. Eveline sat at the table with a laptop open, though she did not appear to read anything on it. The first real argument came over rosemary. "Too much," Eveline said. "It is a turkey, not a legal brief. That does not make excess desirable." "Have you cooked one before?" I have eaten enough of them to recognize error. Useful qualification. Tessa looked up from the carrots. Mom used cinnamon once. Caleb's hand paused above the pan. Tessa continued, unaware or pretending to be. On the turkey. She thought it was paprika because the labels fell off. Dad said it was interesting. It was interesting. Grandma said it tasted like a candle. The kitchen held the memory carefully. Eveline closed her laptop. Your mother died? She asked. Tessa nodded. 3 Christmases ago. Not on Christmas. Before it. Caleb set the rosemary down. He had learned that correcting the way Tessa told grief only made her feel she had failed at remembering. Her name was Hannah, he said. She had leukemia. Eveline's gaze lowered to her hands. I am sorry. It was the first thing she had said without armor. Thank you. No one filled the silence. The turkey went into the oven. Tessa found a box of unfinished place cards and began drawing small stars on the blank ones. Caleb made cocoa. He set a cup near Eveline without asking. I do not drink sugar, she said. Then do not drink it. 5 minutes later, the cup was half empty. They ate at the pine table because the formal dining room had not been heated. Caleb carved the turkey badly. Tessa declared the crispy skin perfect. Eveline ate slowly, as though each bite required her to negotiate with the fact of company. At the end of the meal, Tessa placed 3 of the decorated cards beside their plates. Caleb said Dad in block letters. Hers said Tessa, with 2 S's turned backward. Eveline said Eve. That is not my name, Eveline said. It is the front of it. No one calls me that. Maybe because they think you will say no. Caleb waited for the correction. It did not come. After dinner, the storm worsened. Wind struck the house in long, low pushes. Caleb checked the boiler, then the generator. The mansion had enough fuel for 2 days, assuming no further failures. When he returned to the library, he found Eveline beside the unfinished tree and Tessa asleep under the red blanket from the west sitting room. Caleb frowned. You went back for that? She said the blue guest room felt too far away. And you let her bring it? It is a blanket, not a state secret. He lifted Tessa carefully. Her head settled against his shoulder. At the doorway, he noticed the wooden music box on a table near Eveline. She had brought that too. Good night, he said. Mr. Rowan, he turned. The firelight sharpened the shadows beneath her eyes. The service company will be paid for the full emergency rate. They can pay me when the work is done. The work is done. The system is temporary. You are stranded here. That is not labor. Tonight, maybe not. Tomorrow morning, I will inspect the line and make sure the pressure held. Why? The question sounded larger than the boiler. Caleb shifted Tessa's weight. Because I said I would keep the house warm. Eveline looked toward the dark windows. People say many things on Christmas Eve. I did not say it because of Christmas. He carried his daughter upstairs. Behind him, after a long time, a tiny brass note sounded from the library. 1 note. Then silence. Christmas morning arrived without sunlight. The storm had thinned, but snow still covered the windows of the blue guest room. Caleb woke in an armchair beside Tessa's bed with one boot on and the other beneath the radiator. For several seconds, he did not know where he was. Then the house gave a deep settling creak and memory returned. Grayhaven, the boiler. Eveline Ashcroft. Tessa slept on her stomach with both hands under the pillow. At home, Christmas morning had rules. Caleb would wake before her, place the small gifts beneath the tree, turn on the string lights, and make pancakes shaped like objects no one could identify. This year the gifts were in the back of the van, under a tarp, a second-hand telescope, a book about constellations, and a red scarf his mother had knitted. He had planned to be home before midnight. He pulled on his boot and looked out the window. The van was a white mound in the courtyard. No road was visible. A knock came at the door. Caleb opened it to find a silver tray on a small service cart. Coffee, milk, bread, butter, a bowl of berries. Beside the tray sat a folded note in precise handwriting. The roads remain closed. The generator is stable. Breakfast is available downstairs when convenient. EA. No greeting. No mention of Christmas. Tessa appeared beside him, hair standing in several directions. Did Santa know where we were? Caleb had prepared for illness, bad dreams, rent notices, school questions, and the first Mother's Day without Hannah. He had not prepared for Santa logistics during a blizzard in a billionaire's mansion. Santa knows more than the dispatch company, he said. That is not an answer. It is early. Give him time. They dressed and went downstairs. The hall smelled faintly of coffee and pine. Eveline was in the library, facing the windows. The tree lights were on. 3 small wrapped boxes sat beneath the lowest branches. Tessa stopped. Those were not there last night. Eveline did not turn. Perhaps your father underestimated the efficiency of seasonal transportation. Caleb looked at the boxes. One bore Tessa's name. One said Caleb. The third had no label. You did not have to do that, he said. I did not. The house maintains a general gift closet. Corporate obligations, host gifts, children's items. I selected something age-appropriate. Tessa was already kneeling beside the tree. Can I? Caleb nodded. She opened the first box carefully, preserving the paper because Hannah had taught her wrapping could be used again. Inside was a wooden puzzle of the solar system. The planets fit into a circular frame, each painted by hand. Tessa's face changed in the quiet way children's faces do when delight is too large for noise. It has Pluto, she whispered. I was informed some people remain emotionally attached to it, Eveline said. Pluto did nothing wrong. A strong position. Caleb opened his box and found a pair of lined leather work gloves. Not decorative, heavy, practical, and exactly his size. He looked at Eveline. General gift closet? Grayhaven has a competent house manager who left yesterday. Competence can continue in absence. The unlabeled box remained beneath the tree. Tessa touched it. Who is that one for? No one, Eveline said. Then why wrap it? It was already wrapped. Tessa accepted this for almost 3 seconds. You should open it. I know what is inside. That is not why people open presents. Caleb intervened before the morning became a negotiation. Let it be, Tess. She carried the puzzle to the rug. Eveline watched her arrange the planets. The expression on her face was not happiness. It was closer to hunger remembered by someone who had trained herself not to eat. Caleb went to inspect the boiler. The temporary loop had held. Pressure was steady. The frozen line had thawed without rupture. He photographed the gauges and finally reached dispatch through a weak signal near the service door. The office was closed. An automated message promised a response after the holiday. He tried the county road line. Plows were working the main route, but the private lane to Grayhaven might not be reached until afternoon. On the way back, he noticed the elevator indicator frozen between the first and second floors. He pressed the call button. Nothing, Eveline? No answer. He heard it then. A faint strike from inside the shaft. 3 knocks. Caleb forced the outer door open enough to call through. Are you in there? Unfortunately, her voice came from above, controlled but thinner than usual. How long? 7 minutes. Did the emergency brake engage? The panel is dead. Do not try to move the chair. I am going to cut power and release the door from the machine room. I know how elevators work. Then you know arguing adds no useful function. He ran. The lift was an older residential system retrofitted after Eveline's accident. The motor controller had tripped when moisture reached a damaged junction box. Caleb isolated the circuit, opened the manual lowering valve, and watched the car descend by inches. When it aligned with the first floor, he released the lock. Eveline sat rigid in the center of the car. Her face had lost color. Both hands gripped the wheels. You can come out, he said. I am aware. She moved forward too quickly. One front caster caught the lip between the car and floor. The chair tipped. Caleb stepped in and caught the frame before she fell. For 1 second, her body pressed against his chest. He felt the violent speed of her breathing. She shoved his arm away. Do not touch me. He steadied the chair and stepped back at once. The caster caught. I said, do not touch me. And I stopped. She rolled into the hall. Her hands shook. Caleb closed the lift door behind her. The elevator is out until the junction box is replaced. Then replace it. I do not carry residential elevator components in my pocket. There is a service company. It is Christmas morning. The roads are closed. She turned on him. Stop saying that as if I do not understand the calendar. The sharpness of her voice brought Tessa to the library doorway. Caleb lowered his own. I am saying it because the limits are real. Limits are convenient for people who cannot solve problems, and pretending limits do not exist is convenient for people who can pay others to absorb them. The words hung in the hall. Eveline's face hardened completely. You are dismissed. Caleb almost laughed. From the job no one authorized? From this house. The road is closed. Then wait in your van. Tessa looked from one adult to the other. Caleb felt anger rise, clean and immediate. Not because Eveline was difficult. Difficult people were ordinary. It was the way she used power as a door, closing at the moment another person saw fear behind her. He could have answered with cruelty. He knew exactly where to aim. Instead, he picked up his coat from the bench. Tessa, get your things. The child did not move. Dad, now, she looked at Eveline. Then she walked to the rug, gathered the wooden planets, and placed them back in the box one at a time. Eveline watched Pluto disappear last. Caleb carried the box toward the service corridor. At the door, he heard the elevator bell ring once behind him. Not the elevator, the music box. Tessa had brushed the brass key with her sleeve as she passed the library table. The wooden village turned less than an inch. A soft melody released 2 notes, then caught. Eveline's left foot moved. It was small, a tightening beneath the blanket across her knees, a brief inward turn at the ankle. Caleb saw it because he had spent years watching old structures for movements other people missed, a crack widening, a beam settling, a hinge shifting under weight. Eveline saw him see it. A spasm, she said. He said nothing. It means nothing. I did not say it did. You were about to. No, I was about to leave. He opened the service door. Wind drove snow into the corridor. Tessa stood beside him holding her backpack and the puzzle. Eveline's voice came from the hall. Quieter, the van will not start. Caleb looked back. You do not know that. The branch damaged the battery connection. The security system flagged low voltage last night. He went outside and checked. She was right. The positive terminal had cracked. He could repair it, but not without a replacement clamp or enough metal to fabricate one. The snow around the tires made the question irrelevant for the moment. When he returned, Eveline remained exactly where he had left her. The blue room is still available, she said. Caleb took off his coat. We stay until the road is open. I repair the elevator if I can. I check the boiler. Then we leave. Agreed, and you do not tell my daughter to wait in a frozen vehicle because you are embarrassed that I caught your chair. Her eyes flashed. I was not embarrassed. Then choose another word. She looked away. I do not need to explain myself to you. No. But you need to stop punishing everyone else for what you refuse to explain to yourself. He walked past her before she could answer. For the next 3 hours, they spoke only when necessary. Caleb removed the damaged elevator junction box and discovered the internal contacts had burned, but the housing remained usable. He cleaned the terminals, cut a temporary bridge from copper stock in the boiler room, and restored low-voltage control. It was not a permanent repair, but it allowed the car to operate under manual supervision. Eveline tested it without comment. Tessa sat at the kitchen table, painting the wooden planets with a small watercolor set found in a cabinet. She changed Mars from red to purple because, in her words, no one had asked Mars what color it wanted to be. At noon, the house phone rang. Eveline answered from the library. Caleb heard only her side of the conversation. Yes, a pause. The board meeting was scheduled for the 28th. Another pause. No, Dominic, I will not sign a proxy because you moved the date. Her voice sharpened. My medical status is not relevant to the acquisition. Caleb stopped working on the elevator panel. You will not invoke incapacity. If you try, I will challenge every vote taken under it. Silence, then. Very softly, you arranged yesterday. The call ended. Caleb found her in the library staring at the dead screen of the phone. Your uncle? You listen at doors. The house carries sound. A useful defense. It was not a defense. She turned the chair toward the windows. Dominic chairs North Star's board. He wants to sell the company to a private equity group. I do not. Why does he think he can force it? Because my voting trust requires physical attendance for certain decisions unless I grant a proxy. The clause was written by my grandfather before remote meetings existed. And the board meeting was moved to tomorrow morning. Here, during a storm, he believes I will either sign the proxy or fail to attend. Caleb looked at the elevator. And the staff leaving? Nathan sent a message that I had released everyone early. By the time I learned what happened, most had already gone. You fired him. He claimed it was a misunderstanding. Do you believe him? I believe misunderstandings are often convenient crimes. That explained the unauthorized work order. Nathan had called the boiler service after realizing something had failed, then lost his job before Caleb arrived. Your uncle knew the heat was failing? I do not know. But he knew you would be alone. That appears to have been the point. Caleb considered the mansion, the closed west wing, the canceled dinner, the stalled elevator. He is not trying to buy a company, he said. He is building a picture. Eveline looked at him. Alone in a cold house. No staff. Mechanical failures. Unable to reach the second floor without help. Then he walks in tomorrow and says the board has to protect you from yourself. I do not require your interpretation. You already have mine. And what exactly do you suggest, Miss Rowan? Do not be alone when he arrives. Her laugh held no humor. You think your presence changes a corporate vote? No, I think witnesses change stories. She studied him. Why would you stay? The road is closed. That is not what I asked. Caleb leaned against the library doorframe. Because I know what it looks like when someone turns ordinary failure into evidence that a person cannot be trusted with their own life. Her expression shifted. Who did that to you? He almost refused. Then he looked at Tessa through the open kitchen doors and decided truth did not always need ceremony. After Hannah died, her parents petitioned for temporary custody. They said grief made me unstable. They had photographs of dirty dishes, missed school days, and unpaid bill taped to the refrigerator. All real. None of them meant what they claimed. What happened? I won. How? My daughter told the judge I burned pancakes, but never forgot where she was. A faint breath left Eveline. Not quite a laugh. The standard was low. I was grateful for that. For the first time, she looked at him as something other than a contractor or an inconvenience. Stay for the meeting, she said, as a witness. At the emergency rate, do not push your luck. I have very little left to push. The road opened at 4 in the afternoon. Caleb learned from a county truck that reached the gate. He could have repaired the battery terminal with a clamp the driver carried and left before dark. Instead, he told the driver the van would remain until morning. He did not tell Tessa why. She seemed to understand anyway. That evening, they finished decorating the tree. It happened because Tessa asked where the ladder was. Eveline said the ornaments could stay in boxes. Tessa said boxes were where things waited, not where they lived. Caleb told her not to argue. Eveline told him the child was correct. So Caleb hung lights on the upper branches. Tessa placed wooden birds, glass bells, and cloth angels below. Eveline directed from a distance at first, identifying which ornaments belonged where with the precision of an archivist. Then Tessa found a small carved figure wrapped in tissue. It was a girl in a red coat, one hand lifted as if reaching for someone. The missing figure from the music box. Eveline's face went still. Where did you find that? In the ornament box. Give it to me. Tessa carried it over. Eveline held the figure in her palm. A crack ran through its base. My father carved the village, she said, more to the object than to them. He made one figure for each person in the family. My mother, my uncle, me, my younger brother. Which one is she? Tessa asked. Me. Why is she not in the village? She fell out. You can put her back. The base is broken. Tessa looked toward Caleb. Dad fixes old things. Eveline closed her fingers around the figure. Not everything should be repaired. Caleb stepped down from the ladder. That is true. She looked surprised by the agreement. Some things need to be left as evidence, he continued. Others are broken because no one has tried the right repair. And you know the difference? Usually after I make the wrong choice once. She placed the figure beside the music box, not inside it. The tree was finished near midnight. When the lights came on, they reflected in the tall windows, making a second tree appear in the darkness outside. Tessa lay on the rug with the solar system puzzle around her. Caleb sat on the floor because every chair in the library felt too formal. Eveline remained by the fire. You said your wife died 3 Christmases ago, she said. Yes, do you celebrate because of Tessa? At first. And now? Caleb watched his daughter place Pluto at the edge of the wooden frame. Now I celebrate because grief does not get every room in the house. Eveline looked toward the west wing. Mine does. The admission was so quiet he almost missed it. You can close a room, he said. That does not mean it stops being part of the house. You speak in buildings because people are harder. Buildings are more honest. They also do not leave. No, they just collapse when ignored long enough. The fire shifted. Tessa's breathing deepened. She had fallen asleep on the rug. Eveline looked at the carved girl beside the silent village. My mother died on Christmas Eve, she said. Caleb did not move. 11 years ago. I was in Singapore closing the first North Star acquisition. She called 3 times. I sent each call to voicemail. We had argued the week before. She said I was turning the company into a reason not to have a life. I told her she did not understand what I was building. Her voice remained flat, almost without inflection. She had an aneurysm that night. By the time I returned the call, my father was at the hospital. She never woke. The last gift she wrapped for me is still beneath that tree. Caleb looked at the unlabeled box. You know what is inside? The music box figure. She had taken it to be repaired. My father told me after the funeral, I never opened the package. Years later, the house manager found the figure loose in an ornament box. The repair had failed. And the box? My father stopped winding it after she died. When he died, I stopped entering the room. Until tonight. Until the pipe froze. She said it as if the distinction mattered. Caleb looked at the tree, the wrapped gift, and the woman who had built hotels so other people could arrive somewhere warm. Your mother was right about one thing, he said. Eveline's eyes sharpened. You are using the company as a reason not to have a life. The room went cold despite the fire. You have known me for 1 day. Long enough to know you would rather fight a board than open a present. You confuse intrusion with insight. Maybe, and you believe loss gives you authority over everyone else's grief. That struck where she intended. Caleb stood. No, loss taught me grief becomes dangerous when it starts making decisions. He lifted Tessa. Good night, Eveline. He reached the doorway. Caleb, it was the first time she used his name. He turned. Her hand rested near the brass key of the music box. Do you think the figure can be repaired? Yes. Without hiding the crack? That would be the point. He carried Tessa upstairs. In the library, alone again, Eveline opened the unlabeled gift. The paper had yellowed along the folds. Inside lay an empty bed of tissue, the repair shop's receipt, and a note in her mother's handwriting. Evie, the carver says the crack can be strengthened but not erased. I told him that was fine. Some things should come home honest. Love, Mom. Eveline read it until the words blurred. Then she placed the note beside the cracked figure and left both where the morning light would find them. The board arrived the next morning in black vehicles that moved through the snow like a procession. Dominic Ashcroft came first. He was 63, silver-haired, carefully dressed, and broad enough to make every doorway seem designed around him. He entered Grayhaven without removing his gloves and paused when he saw Caleb standing beside the repaired elevator. You must be the contractor. Caleb Rowan. Dominic looked at the tool case, then at the blue guest room key in Caleb's hand. You stayed overnight. It was not a question. The road was closed. Of course. The two words carried an entire accusation while remaining technically polite. Behind him came a lawyer named Miriam Voss, North Star's chief financial officer, and three directors Caleb recognized from business pages. They shook snow from expensive coats and lowered their voices when they saw Tessa at the kitchen table. Dominic's gaze rested on the child. And this is? My daughter. Grayhaven is not a public shelter, Mr. Rowan. No. It is a house with a broken boiler. Dominic smiled without warmth. Eveline has always attracted men who confuse access with importance. Caleb heard the practiced shape of the sentence. Dominic had used versions of it before. Then she will probably recognize the pattern, he said. The smile disappeared. Eveline entered from the library wearing a dark green suit, her hair pinned back, her chair polished, and every trace of the previous night's confession removed from her face. You moved the meeting without authorization, she said. Dominic turned toward her with the expression of a concerned relative greeting someone who had caused worry. We moved it because the acquisition window closes Friday. We could not risk another delay. You did not inform me until yesterday. We sent notice to your office. After releasing my staff under a false instruction, Nathan misunderstood a conversation. Nathan lied. He has already been dismissed. What more would you like? The truth would be efficient. Miriam Voss opened a leather folder. Perhaps we should begin. They moved to the formal dining room because the boardroom on the second floor depended on the elevator, and Eveline refused to let Dominic choose the setting. Caleb stayed near the door as agreed. Tessa remained in the kitchen with a book and strict instructions not to enter. The table had been cleared of unused Christmas place settings. 8 leather folders sat where plates should have been. Dominic took the chair at the head. Eveline stopped across from him. That is my seat. He rose slowly. Of course. It seemed small, but Caleb understood the exchange. Dominic had occupied the place to see whether she would demand it back. She did. The meeting began with numbers. North Star's occupancy had fallen 9% over 2 years. 3 major redevelopment projects were behind schedule. Debt had increased after a failed expansion into private residences. Belgrave Capital offered a premium for shareholders, guaranteed executive continuity, and planned to sell 12 heritage properties to reduce liabilities. Eveline listened without interruption. When Miriam finished, she asked one question. How many employees lose their positions in the first year? Miriam glanced at Dominic. The proposal uses the phrase operational consolidation. How many? Approximately 3,800 globally. And the heritage properties? They are capital-intensive assets. They are the reason North Star exists. Dominic folded his hands. North Star exists to produce value for shareholders. I built it to prove preservation could produce value without destroying what made a place worth saving. You built it in a different market. No. I built it before everyone else realized old buildings could be more valuable than new ones. Caleb looked at her then. For the first time, he saw the woman described in the old profiles. Not the isolated billionaire in a cold house. A founder who could reduce a room full of experts to the question they had avoided. Dominic changed strategy. This is not only about the transaction, he said. It is about governance. Your attendance has been irregular. Your health has required extended accommodations. Key decisions are delayed because documents still require your direct approval. My health has not prevented me from reading. It has prevented you from traveling. For now. 3 years is not for now, Eveline. The words were gentle. That made them worse. We need a structure that does not depend on your physical capacity. You mean a structure that does not depend on my consent. I mean a structure that protects the company if you cannot perform the duties of chair. Miriam slid a document across the table. Temporary delegation of executive voting authority. The same proxy Dominic had requested by phone. Eveline did not touch it. No. The board can petition under the trust's incapacity clause. On what medical basis? Functional, not medical. Dominic looked toward the door where Caleb stood. Yesterday, the residents lost heat. The elevator failed. You were alone without staff. An unvetted contractor and his child spent the night. This morning, we discovered that confidential rooms in the West Wing were opened. Caleb felt the design lock into place. Miriam continued, uncomfortable now. There are also concerns about security access. The contractor entered the private service archive to repair a frozen pipe, Eveline said. Was he supervised? By me. At all times? The question was not about pipes. Eveline's eyes moved to Caleb for one fraction of a second. Dominic saw it. This is exactly the problem, he said softly. You are making decisions under isolation and distress. No one is accusing you of incompetence. We are asking you to accept support. Caleb understood why the man was dangerous. He never attacked when concern could do more damage. Eveline placed both hands on the table. You sent away the staff. You moved the meeting. You used a mechanical failure you may have known about, then arrived with documents questioning my judgment. Do not call the trap support simply because you lined it with velvet. One of the directors looked down. Dominic's tone hardened. Do you have evidence? Not yet. Then what you have is suspicion. Suspicion has preserved more companies than trust. And destroyed more families. That landed. The meeting recessed for 20 minutes. Dominic left the room with Miriam. Two directors went to make calls. The CFO remained at the table, staring at the acquisition summary, as if hoping the numbers would become less personal. Eveline rolled into the library. Caleb followed. He planned every detail, he said. Yes, can the board invoke the clause today? Not without 5 votes. He has 4. Miriam is undecided. What changes her mind? Evidence that the sale is worse than remaining independent. Do you have that? Not in a form the board will accept by noon. Caleb looked at the scale model of Grayhaven on a side table, then at photographs of North Star properties on the wall. Hotels built inside old stations, mills, schools, and hospitals. What is Belgrave really buying? Real estate. Brand. Management contracts. What are they missing? She looked at him. Every buyer misses something, otherwise the price would be exact. Eveline's attention sharpened. Belgrave values the heritage properties as buildings. Their offer assumes 12 must be sold because accessible renovation costs are too high. Are they? Under current standards, yes. Caleb walked to a photograph of the North Star Bellwether, an old railway hotel in Baltimore. Current standards were added after construction. Ramps through front lobbies. Oversized bathroom conversions. Elevators cut through structural bays. Expensive because they are treated as corrections. What would you treat them as? Routes. A building already has movement patterns. Service corridors. Freight lifts. Adjoining rooms. You do not force access through the most obvious door. You find the path that does the least violence. Eveline stared at the image. You are a boiler contractor. Today, what were you before? Caleb hesitated. I restored historic properties. Small ones. Churches, theaters, houses. Hannah and I had a company. Rowan Conservation. After she got sick, I took whatever emergency work kept cash coming. Why did the company end? Because I could not be at a job site and a hospital at the same time. Clients were understanding until understanding cost money. She turned back to the photographs. Could the bellwether be made fully accessible without the planned central elevator? I would need drawings. How long? To know whether the idea is possible? An hour. To prove it? Weeks. We have 52 minutes. Then let us aim for possible. They went to the West Archive. The room Dominic had called confidential held decades of plans in flat drawers. Caleb found the bellwether set and spread it across the long table. Eveline pulled up renovation budgets on her laptop. They worked without small talk. Tessa appeared at the door carrying 2 pieces of toast. You forgot breakfast. Caleb took one. Thank you. She handed the other to Eveline. I ate. That was yesterday. Eveline accepted the toast. Caleb traced the original service wing. A freight elevator connected the basement kitchens to all guest floors, but stopped behind a wall added during a 1980s renovation. Reopening the route and converting adjoining staff rooms could create accessible suites without cutting through the central structure. The freight car is too narrow, Eveline said. The shaft is not. The car can be replaced. Fire separation? Build a protected lobby here and here. Guest experience? Private arrival. Direct access from parking. Families with medical equipment may prefer it. Tessa leaned over the plan. What is this room? Old linen storage, Caleb said. It is bigger than our apartment. Not quite. Almost Eveline looked at the adjoining rooms, then at a column of figures. Belgrave budgeted $14 million for the central elevator and structural reinforcement. This route might be 4, maybe 5 if the foundation needs work. Across 12 properties, you are not looking at a liability. You are looking at rooms you have not been selling. She became very still. Accessible family suites, she said. Not minimum compliance. Long-stay rooms near rehabilitation centers. Kitchens, equipment storage. Adjoining caregiver rooms. A hotel designed around people who travel differently. North Star owns 6 properties within 2 miles of major rehabilitation hospitals. Caleb smiled. There is your missing value. They returned to the dining room with 14 minutes left. Eveline presented the idea without promising what she could not prove. She showed the bellwether route, the cost difference, and the demand data North Star already possessed but had never analyzed as a separate market. Belgrave's offer prices these properties as burdens, she said. If the board votes today, it sells a category of growth before we have measured it. I propose a 90-day hold and an independent feasibility review. Dominic listened with his hands folded. When she finished, he looked at Caleb. This concept came from a contractor during breakfast? It came from the building, Caleb said. I only read the plan. And your qualifications? Caleb gave them plainly. 15 years in restoration. State licenses. Projects completed. Company closed. Current emergency work. Dominic nodded as though each answer confirmed something. A failed contractor offers a desperate founder a plan to save her company. It has a certain seasonal appeal. Caleb felt the insult. Eveline answered before he could. He did not offer to save anything. He identified a structural route your analysts missed. Then commission a report after the transaction. Belgrave can evaluate it. Belgrave has no incentive to preserve properties it intends to sell. Miriam Voss looked at the plans again. A 90-day review is reasonable, she said. Dominic's expression did not change, but the room did. The vote split 4-4. Under the trust rules, a tied vote preserved the current position. The sale could not proceed. Dominic closed his folder. 90 days, he said. Then we vote again. With full information, Eveline replied, assuming you remain capable of chairing the process. He stood, walked to the door, and paused beside Caleb. People who enter this family through a service entrance rarely understand how quickly it can close. Caleb met his eyes. Then it is fortunate I know how to repair doors. Dominic left. The vehicles disappeared down the hill before noon. For several minutes after they were gone, no one in Grayhaven spoke. Then Tessa entered the dining room and placed Pluto in the center of the acquisition folder. Did we win? Eveline looked at the plans. We delayed losing. Dad says sometimes that is the first part. Caleb did not remember saying it, but it sounded like something he might have needed to believe. The road was clear by afternoon. He repaired the van terminal, loaded his tools, and carried Tessa's gifts to the passenger seat. Eveline met them in the courtyard. Snow had stopped. For the first time, the full valley was visible below the hill. North Star needs a feasibility study, she said. 12 properties. Existing circulation, structural constraints, preliminary cost models. You need an architecture firm. I have 3. They produced the plans you just corrected. Then you need better firms. I need someone who reads old buildings before drawing over them. Caleb closed the van door. I no longer have a company. Reopen it. He almost dismissed the idea. Then he thought of the unpaid electric bill, the storage unit holding his old drafting table, and Hannah's name still printed beneath his on the original business license. A 12-property study is too large for one person. Hire people. With what money? North Star will pay a mobilization fee. You barely know me. I know your work held through a storm. I know you did not exaggerate the idea when exaggeration would have served you. I know you stayed after you could leave. Those facts are more useful than years of polished proposals. Caleb looked toward Tessa. She sat in the van arranging the planets across the dashboard. 90 days, Eveline said. Then the board votes. And if the study fails, you will be paid for honest work. And if it succeeds, North Star remains independent. That is your answer. What is yours? He looked back at Grayhaven, the unfinished rooms, the silent music box, the figure with the visible crack. Send the contract. Eveline held out her hand. Caleb took it. Her grip was cool and firm. Tessa lowered the window. Can we come back when it is not a work emergency? Eveline released Caleb's hand. Your father will be working. That is not what I asked. For a moment, Eveline had no answer. Then she said, yes. Caleb drove away with Grayhaven in the mirror. He did not see Eveline remain in the courtyard after the van disappeared. He did not see her look down at the track his tires had made through the snow. And he did not see Dominic's black sedan parked beyond the lower gate, where a man inside photographed the handshake. The first 2 weeks of the North Star study moved faster than Caleb's old life knew how to accommodate. He reopened Rowan Conservation from his kitchen table. The bank account held $600 and a mobilization payment large enough to make him check the number 4 times. He called 2 former employees. One had moved to Oregon. The other, Luis Mendoza, asked only one question. Is this real work or rich people panic? Both, Luis joined the next morning. Caleb hired a structural engineer named Priya Desai on contract and rented a small office above a hardware store. Tessa drew a new company logo, a crooked house with an open door. Caleb placed it on the wall beside the original Rowan Conservation sign because removing either felt wrong. Eveline attended every review by video. She was demanding, impatient, and incapable of allowing a vague answer to survive more than 10 seconds. She was also usually right. When Caleb estimated 3 weeks for the bellwether survey, she asked why. When he explained the need for material testing, she approved it without negotiation. When a hotel manager tried to hide water damage behind recent paint, she ordered the room closed and the repair funded that afternoon. She did not ask him how he was coping with the workload. He did not ask how often she used the elevator at Grayhaven alone. Their trust developed through documents. He sent drawings at midnight. She returned them at 5 in the morning with notes in the margins. He rejected a marble ramp because its slope prioritized appearance over safety. She backed him against the design committee. She rejected his first family suite layout because the caregiver room felt like storage. He redrew it and admitted she was right. Tessa became part of the rhythm because school closed for winter break. She sat in the office with headphones, colored plans, and occasionally asked questions professionals had trained themselves not to notice. Why is the bathroom mirror too high? Why does the person in the wheelchair get the room farthest from the window? If this door is automatic, what happens when the power goes out? Priya began calling her the director of obvious problems. Eveline called her Miss Rowan. Tessa called her Eve. The name remained. On the 3rd Friday, Caleb brought the repaired wooden figure to Grayhaven. He had stabilized the crack with a narrow brass pin and filled the missing edge with dark resin, leaving the break visible as a thin line across the base. He had also cleaned the music box mechanism and replaced a worn spring, but he did not wind it. Eveline met him in the west sitting room. You repaired the box, too. The mechanism. The song is your decision. He placed the carved girl in her palm. She turned it slowly. You left the crack. You asked me to. Most restorers try to make damage disappear. Bad ones do. Good restoration makes the object whole without lying about what happened. Her eyes lifted to his. You have rehearsed that sentence. For buildings. Of course. He showed her how the figure fit into the ring around the central tree. Eveline pressed it into place. The village was complete. Her hand moved toward the brass key, then stopped. Not today, she said. Not today. Caleb packed his tools. As he turned to leave, Eveline said, The photograph Dominic took is circulating. He looked back. She held up her tablet. A business site had published an article. Is North Star Founder's new advisor more than a consultant? Beneath it was the courtyard photograph of their handshake, cropped to make the moment intimate. That was fast. Dominic believes scandal will undermine the study. There is no scandal. Facts are not required. Only a shape people recognize. Widowed contractor. Isolated billionaire. Sudden contract. Caleb read the first paragraph. It implied favoritism, questioned his qualifications, and mentioned the custody petition filed after Hannah's death, without noting that it had been dismissed. His chest tightened. How did they find that? Public records. Tessa's school is named. My legal team is demanding removal. It is already copied everywhere. Eveline watched him absorb it. You can end the contract, she said. Is that what you want? No, the answer came immediately. Then why offer? Because staying now costs more than work. Caleb looked at the repaired village. Leaving costs exactly what Dominic wants. That is not a reason to expose your daughter. No, she is the reason to decide carefully. He called Tessa's school, then his mother. He arranged for the office address to be removed from public listings and had Priya handle the next site visit. He did not resign. The next morning, the article reached a local television station. By afternoon, a reporter was waiting outside Tessa's school. That was when the cost stopped being theoretical. Caleb arrived through the rear entrance and found Tessa sitting in the principal's office, furious rather than frightened. He asked if you were marrying the wheelchair lady, she said. The principal winced. Caleb crouched in front of her. What did you say? I said she has a name. Good, then I said it was none of his business. Also good. Then I kicked his microphone. Less good. It was on the floor. That helps very little. He took her home. Eveline called before dinner. I have arranged security. No, this is not negotiable. It is at my home. Everything is negotiable. The reporter approached a child because of me. Because of Dominic. The distinction does not protect her. Caleb heard guilt turning into control. We will stay with my mother for a few days. The school has procedures. I will handle it. Handling it alone is not strength. He almost laughed at the source. You learned that quickly. Silence, that was unfair, he said. It was accurate. Eveline, the contract is suspended, effective immediately. You will be paid through the month. Caleb stood from the kitchen table. You cannot fire me to protect me. I can terminate a consultant. Because your uncle crossed a line? Because your daughter was approached at school. And what happens to the study? North Star will complete it internally. They missed the roots the first time. That is no longer your concern. The sentence closed the door exactly as she intended. You do this every time someone gets close enough to be hurt, he said. You make the leaving look like your decision. This is not personal. That is the lie you use when it is most personal. Her breathing changed on the line. The suspension stands. Then say the real thing. Good night, Caleb. The call ended. Tessa stood in the hallway in her pajamas. Did he fire you? He set the phone down. Yes, because I kicked the microphone. No, because she does not want us. Caleb wished children asked smaller questions. Because she thinks wanting people gives other people a way to hurt them. Tessa considered that. That sounds lonely. It is. Are we going back? Not right now. She walked to the table and took the paper star she had made at Grayhaven from her backpack. On the back, she wrote something in purple marker, folded it once, and placed it in an envelope. Can you mail this? What does it say? It is not for you. He mailed it the next morning. 3 days later, North Star's internal team submitted its first revised feasibility report. It rejected 8 of the 12 properties as too expensive to adapt. Dominic scheduled the final board vote for February instead of March. And at Grayhaven, Eveline sat alone in the west sitting room with Tessa's paper star in her hands. On one side, the child had drawn 3 figures beneath a tree. On the other, she had written, "Rich people do not get less lonely. They just get more rooms to put it in." Underneath, in smaller letters, "You did not ruin Christmas. You were Christmas." Eveline read the words twice. Then she turned the brass key on the music box. The wooden village began to move. The melody was soft and imperfect. 1 gear clicked every 7th turn. The carved girl in the red coat passed the same window, the same tree, the same empty space, again and again. Halfway through the song, Eveline felt pressure beneath her left heel. Not pain, not a spasm. Pressure. Her breath stopped. She tried to move the foot again. Nothing happened. The melody continued. She did not call anyone. Not yet. Eveline did not sleep that night. At 2 in the morning, she called Dr. Saira Patel, the rehabilitation specialist she had avoided for 6 weeks. "I felt something," Eveline said when the doctor answered. There was a pause long enough to contain caution. "Describe it." Eveline did. Doctor, Patel did not celebrate. She did not promise. She asked precise questions, then said the sensation might indicate returning neurological response. Altered muscle tone, or nothing that could yet be measured. "Come in tomorrow," she said. "I have a board crisis." "You have had a board crisis for 3 years. Come in tomorrow." Eveline almost refused. Then the music box clicked on its 7th turn. 10 o'clock, she said. The examination produced no miracle. There was a faint response in one muscle group that had previously shown none. Dr. Patel repeated the test 3 times, then sat back. "This is information," she said. "Not a promise, I understand. Do you? Because the dangerous thing now is turning one response into a deadline. What is the useful thing? Returning to therapy. Consistently, without treating your body like a hostile employee." Eveline looked away. "And without hiding progress, because hope feels less controllable than disappointment." "I did not hide it. You called at 2 in the morning after trying alone. That is the medical equivalent of hiding it." Eveline left with a new therapy schedule and no intention of telling Caleb. That intention lasted 6 days. The internal North Star study grew worse. The design team applied standard accessibility formulas to buildings that resisted them, inflated costs, and recommended selling the exact properties Belgrave wanted. Miriam Voss sent Eveline a private note. Without credible alternatives, she would vote for the acquisition. Dominic had 5 votes. Caleb had stopped answering North Star messages because there were none to answer. He reopened 3 small restoration jobs and tried to behave as if the largest contract of his life had not vanished. The office above the hardware store felt quieter without hotel plans covering the walls. Luis remained because he had already turned down another job. Priya stayed 2 days a week and pretended her decision was financial. Tessa came after school, did homework beneath the Crooked House logo, and asked each afternoon whether Eve had called. The answer remained no. On the 7th day, a black North Star car stopped outside. Eveline entered the office alone. The elevator in the building had been broken for years. Caleb knew this because the landlord had called it decorative infrastructure. The office was on the 2nd floor. He heard the sound of the stair lift before he saw her. The chair rose slowly along the narrow rail, carrying Eveline into view. She wore a dark coat and an expression that warned against mentioning the indignity of the machine. Caleb stood from the drafting table. "How did you get up here?" With great patience and questionable equipment. Luis looked from one to the other and gathered his papers. "Priya needs me downstairs." "Priya is not here," Caleb said. "Then she needs me somewhere else." He left. Tessa emerged from the back room. For 1 second, she looked ready to run toward Eveline. Then she remembered the firing and folded her arms. "You got my letter." "I did." You did not answer. I did not know how. You could have used words. Eveline accepted the correction. Yes, Tessa waited. I am sorry, Eveline said. I ended your father's contract because I was afraid my problems would continue hurting you. I did not ask what either of you wanted. That was wrong. Tessa looked at Caleb, then back at Eveline. Are you still lonely? The question entered the room without mercy. Yes. Then firing people did not work. No, it did not. Tessa considered the apology complete. She walked forward and placed a purple planet sticker on the side of Eveline's chair. That is Mars, she said. I changed it. Eveline looked down at the sticker. I see. You can take it off later. I will not. Tessa went back to her homework. Caleb remained standing. Why are you here? Eveline set a folder on the drafting table. To ask Rowan Conservation to complete the study. You terminated the contract. I made an error. That is not a sentence you use often. Do not make me regret it. The board vote is in 3 weeks. 18 days. The internal team wasted almost a month. Yes, we cannot survey 12 properties in 18 days. Then choose the 6 that matter most. And if the rest fail, the board needs proof the model works, not perfection. Caleb opened the folder. New contract. Increased budget. Direct authority over Northstar's design teams. A clause protecting his company from termination without cause. You had lawyers write this. They objected to several provisions, which is why they are probably useful. He turned to the signature page but did not sign. You could have sent this. I needed to come. Why? She looked toward Tessa. Because apologies sent through assistants are not apologies. Caleb closed the folder. There is something else. Eveline's hand tightened slightly on the wheel rim. I felt movement in my left foot. He did not react the way she had feared. No shock. No immediate smile. No question about walking. What did your doctor say? That it is information, not a promise. Good doctor. I have resumed therapy. Good, that is all? What do you want me to say? She looked almost angry. I do not know. Caleb pulled a chair beside the drafting table and sat so their eyes were level. Then, I will say this. You do not owe anyone a recovery story. Not the board, not me, not yourself. If something changes, we deal with what changes. If nothing changes, you still decide what happens to Northstar. The muscles in her face loosened. Everyone keeps saying hope is important. Hope is useful. Debt is not. Do not borrow against a future your body did not promise. She looked at him for a long moment. You speak in financial language now. I am adapting to the client. Am I the client again? Caleb opened the folder and signed. For 18 days. The work consumed them. They began with the 6 Northstar properties nearest major rehabilitation hospitals: Baltimore, Boston, Chicago, Denver, Phoenix, and Seattle. Caleb divided the teams. Priya handled structural modeling. Luis led site documentation. Northstar supplied local engineers and hotel operations staff. Eveline moved to the city penthouse she had not used since the accident because it sat closer to the Northstar offices and therapy center. Caleb worked there most evenings after site calls. Tessa occupied the corner of the dining table with homework, colored pencils, and an expanding collection of hotel keycards. The penthouse was sleek, expensive, and almost entirely unlived in. No photographs, no soft chairs, no objects without a function. On the second evening, Tessa brought a small ceramic bowl from the kitchen and placed it near the door. What is that? Eveline asked. A place for keys. There is a drawer. Drawers hide things. Bowls remember them. The bowl remained. On the 4th evening, Caleb cooked pasta because everyone had forgotten dinner. Eveline objected to the amount of garlic, then ate 2 servings. Tessa fell asleep on the sofa beneath Caleb's coat. They worked in lowered voices. At 11, Eveline closed the Boston cost model. You should take her home. I will. Neither moved. Snow had begun outside, lighter than the Christmas storm. City lights dissolved behind it. Did you always want to restore buildings? She asked. No, I wanted to draw them. Architecture? I studied for 2 years. Then my father died and the tuition did not become more affordable out of respect. I apprenticed with a preservation contractor. I found I liked discovering how something was made more than telling people how to make something new. Hannah worked with you? She did research, paint history, archives. She could look at 6 layers of wallpaper and tell you which family was trying to impress which neighbor. Evelyn smiled faintly. You loved her. Yes, the answer held no apology. Does that make this harder? She asked. Caleb knew what this meant only after the room changed around the question. What is this? Exactly, he looked toward Tessa asleep on the sofa. Hannah is not an empty position someone else fills. Evelyn's gaze dropped. That was not what I meant. I know. He waited until she looked at him again. Loving someone who died does not make the rest of life a betrayal. It took me a long time to understand that. The space between them narrowed without either moving. Evelyn's hand rested on the table near his, not touching. I do not know how to do any of this, she said. Neither do I. You seem less alarmed. I have a child. I operate alarmed most of the time. She laughed softly. Tessa stirred. The moment ended, but it did not disappear. On day 11, the Chicago model failed. The old lakeshore property had no viable internal route for an accessible elevator without removing a historic staircase protected by preservation law. Belgrave's estimate had been correct. The failure threatened the entire proposal because Chicago was the largest property and the board's favorite example of impossible adaptation. Caleb spent 14 hours with the plans. Priya tested 3 structural options. All were too expensive. At 2 a.m, Evelyn found Caleb on the penthouse floor surrounded by drawings. Go home, she said. There is a route. You have said that for 6 hours. Because there is. The building is not a moral test, Caleb. It can be impossible. He looked at her. You believe that? About buildings, yes. Convenient distinction. She moved closer. Do not turn my medical situation into an argument about a staircase. I am not. I am saying impossible is sometimes a conclusion people reach after asking the same question too many ways, and sometimes it is a fact. Then we prove it. We do not assume it, because the obvious route fails. He returned to the original 1912 plans. The hotel had once connected to a neighboring theater through an underground service passage. The theater had been demolished, but its foundation remained under a parking structure owned by North Star. Caleb traced the passage. What if the elevator is not inside the hotel? Eveline leaned over the plan. A separate arrival pavilion. Elevator through the old theater foundation. Enclosed bridge at the 2nd floor into the hotel gallery. The preservation order protects the main facade, not the parking structure. And the bridge becomes the new entrance feature instead of a hidden accommodation. She looked at him, eyes alive with the idea. A glass winter garden, wide enough for families. Seating, equipment storage, visible from the lake. Not a correction, he said. An arrival. They built the model by dawn. At 6, Caleb realized their shoulders had been touching for several minutes. Neither moved away immediately. The board preview took place on day 15. Miriam Voss attended in person. 2 directors joined remotely. Dominic arrived late and said nothing through the first presentation. Caleb's team showed 6 properties, 6 routes, and cost reductions averaging 41% compared with prior plans. Evelyn presented the business model, accessible family suites, partnerships with rehabilitation centers, extended stay packages, and specialized staff training. The projected return was conservative but real. Miriam asked hard questions. Caleb answered what he knew and admitted what required further testing. Priya defended the structural assumptions. Hotel managers provided demand data. Dominic waited until the end. Even if the model works, he said, North Star lacks the capital to renovate 6 properties without taking on additional debt. Belgrave's offer remains the safer option. Eveline opened a second document. North Star does not need to fund all 6 at once. The Bellwether pilot requires $4.8 million. I have secured conditional financing from the Ashcroft Foundation. Dominic's face changed. The foundation board has not approved that. It does not require the full board for a program-related investment under $5 million. As principal beneficiary, I can authorize it with Miriam's compliance review. Miriam nodded. The structure is valid. You are using charitable assets to protect your company, Dominic said. I am investing them in accessible lodging for families receiving medical care. North Star repays the principal from operating revenue. The foundation receives a below-market return and measurable public benefit. You designed this to bypass me. I designed it to function without your permission. The room fell silent. Dominic looked at Caleb. And what does Mr. Rowan receive if North Star survives? His contracted fee. Nothing more? The insinuation was clear. Eveline did not glance at Caleb. What I give or do not give Mr. Rowan personally is not a board matter. His work is. Challenge the work, if you can. Dominic closed the presentation folder. The final vote is Friday. He left without another word. Miriam stayed. He will attack the foundation financing, she said, and Caleb's conflict disclosure. There is no conflict, Eveline replied. Miriam looked between them, then keep it that way until the vote. After she left, Caleb stood by the window. She is right. Eveline turned toward him. About what? We cannot give Dominic another opening. There is nothing to disclose. Not yet. Her expression cooled. You regret the conversation the other night. No. Then what are you saying? That for 4 more days, the company comes first. You sound like my mother. Your mother said the opposite. She said I used the company to avoid a life. You are suggesting I postpone one. Caleb crossed the room and stopped in front of her. I am suggesting Dominic does not get to define whatever this becomes before we do. The anger in her face softened. Whatever this becomes, she repeated. I told you. I do not know how to do this. Neither do I. She reached for his hand. He let her take it. No cameras, no board, no contract language, just her fingers closing around his. They remained like that until Tessa came in, carrying the key bowl from the hallway. I found the conference room keys in the fruit bowl, she announced. Caleb stepped back. Tessa looked between them. Was I interrupting? Yes, Eveline said. Sorry, she was not sorry at all. The final setback came 36 hours before the vote. A North Star auditor discovered that the Ashcroft Foundation's charter prohibited investments in companies where a trustee held a controlling personal interest. Eveline was both principal beneficiary and North Star's largest shareholder. The financing could be challenged in court. Dominic had found the clause. Without funding, the Bellwether pilot remained a plan. Without a funded pilot, Miriam would vote for Belgrave. The team gathered at the penthouse after midnight. Priya searched municipal grants. Luis called preservation lenders. North Star's finance staff modeled debt structures. Every option required weeks they did not have. Eveline sat at the head of the table, reading the charter again and again. He waited, she said. He knew about the clause and waited until the last possible hour. Caleb studied the financing schedule. What does the pilot actually need on day 1? $4.8 million committed. Committed or spent? Committed, construction draws over 10 months. How much cash to begin design and permits? $600,000. He looked at Rowan Conservation's contract, then at the projected fees for 6 properties. North Star owes my company $940,000 over the next year. Eveline saw where he was going. No, convert the fee into a performance note. Rowan defers payment. North Star uses the first $600,000 for the pilot. Your company has been open for less than 2 months. It has payroll and 3 active projects. We can survive on the mobilization balance if we reduce the site schedule. You have a daughter. Which is why I am not donating the money, I am investing it. In a company facing a hostile sale. In work I understand. Caleb, you could lose everything again. He leaned forward. I did not lose Rowan because the work failed. I lost it because life required more than I had. This is different. It is reckless. Then find a better option before morning. They searched for 4 more hours. There was no better option. At dawn, Eveline signed the performance note with a hand that shook from exhaustion and anger. I hate this, she said. Good, it means you understand the risk. If the board approves Belgrave, your note becomes nearly worthless. Then we should present well. She looked at him with something deeper than gratitude and more frightening than hope. Why are you doing this? Caleb glanced at Tessa asleep with her head on a stack of hotel towels someone had brought as samples. Because my daughter asked whether we were going back. I realized I did not want Grayhaven to become another place we survived and left. Eveline's eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. You cannot promise not to leave. No, then what can you promise? That I will not make leaving my first answer. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she reached across the table. This time, Caleb bent and kissed her. It was brief. Careful. Not a rescue. Not a declaration. Not payment for risk. A beginning with no guarantee. When they separated, Eveline touched his face once. The company still comes first for 6 hours, she whispered. 5, he said. You argue slowly. She laughed against his shoulder. Across the room, Tessa opened one eye, smiled, and closed it again. The final board meeting began at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning beneath a sky the color of unpolished steel. North Star's headquarters occupied the upper floors of a restored post office in Manhattan. Eveline had bought the building 14 years earlier, when advisors told her the marble halls were inefficient and the sorting rooms impossible to divide. She preserved the brass cages, reopened the skylights, and turned the old mail tunnels into service corridors. The building itself had been her first argument against obvious conclusions. Caleb arrived through the main entrance with Tessa, Luis, and Priya. Reporters crowded behind the barriers outside. The article about him had returned in a new form overnight, now questioning whether his deferred fee was a concealed personal loan to Eveline. North Star's legal team had advised him not to speak. He did not. Inside, employees lined the lobby railings. Some held phones. Others simply watched. The possible sale had become real to them in the way corporate decisions become real only when people begin imagining boxes on their desks. Tessa took Caleb's hand. Are they all getting fired if we lose? Not all. That is not better. No, she looked toward the elevator bank. Is Eve scared? Probably. Does she know you know? Probably. Good. The boardroom occupied the old postal inspection chamber. Tall windows faced the river. A long walnut table ran beneath a carved ceiling. The directors were already seated when Eveline entered. She wore a midnight blue suit and no jewelry except a small brass star pinned near her collar. Caleb recognized it as the broken bass from the music box figure. Trimmed and polished into a simple shape, she took her place at the head of the table. Dominic sat to her right. Belgrave's representatives occupied the far side of the room. Their lead partner, Samuel Klein, wore the relaxed expression of a man attending a transaction he believed had already occurred. Miriam Voss reviewed the agenda. First, the board would consider Belgrave's acquisition proposal. Second, it would consider the Bellwether pilot and North Star's alternative strategic plan. Third, if the acquisition failed, the board would vote on continued confidence in Eveline as chair. Dominic had added the third item that morning. Efficient, Eveline said. Necessary, he replied. Belgrave presented first. Their numbers were polished, conservative, and persuasive. They promised immediate shareholder value, debt reduction, and global brand expansion. The layoffs appeared on one slide under the phrase workforce optimization. The sale of historic properties appeared under asset discipline. Samuel Klein spoke for 40 minutes without once using the words guest, family, or employee. When he finished, Dominic thanked him. Then Eveline began. She did not start with the financial model. She started with a photograph. It showed a woman sleeping upright in a hospital chair beside her husband's rehabilitation bed. 2 suitcases stood beneath her feet. A paper cup rested in her hand. This is not a North Star guest, Eveline said. Her name is Rebecca Lawson. Her husband spent 7 weeks in rehabilitation after a construction accident. The nearest accessible hotel room with a usable kitchen cost $480 a night. She slept in a chair for 23 nights, then drove 2 hours each way from her sister's home. The next photograph showed a father lifting a teenage son into a bathtub because the hotel had called the room accessible but installed no transfer space. The next showed 3 children eating dinner on a hospital floor while their mother received therapy. North Star has spent 3 years treating accessibility as a renovation expense, Eveline said. Belgrave treats it as a discount against our real estate. Both views are wrong. It is a market we failed to see because we designed around the building first and the person second. She turned the presentation over to Caleb. He stood at the end of the table with no podium and no prepared speech. Old buildings are usually accused of being inflexible, he said. They are not. People are. We decide there is one proper entrance, one valuable room, one efficient route. Then we call the structure impossible when it refuses our first idea. He showed the 6 plans. At Baltimore, an abandoned laundry route became private accessible arrival. At Boston, 2 adjoining staff floors became family suites connected to a rehabilitation clinic by shuttle. At Denver, an exterior ramp disappeared into a landscape terrace instead of cutting across the historic steps. At Phoenix, a former courtyard became a shaded mobility garden. At Seattle, unused conference rooms became equipment storage and caregiver kitchens. At Chicago, the demolished Theater Foundation supported a new glass winter garden and elevator pavilion. These are not cheaper copies of standard rooms, Caleb said. They are better rooms for people hotels have asked to adapt themselves to bad design. Priya presented the engineering. Luis presented the site phasing. North Star operations managers presented demand. Then Miriam explained the pilot financing. Rowan Conservation has agreed to defer $940,000 in fees through a performance note. North Star will redirect $600,000 of near-term payments to design, permits, and pre-construction at the Bellwether. The balance of pilot financing will be raised against signed rehabilitation center partnerships and room pre-sales. Samuel Klein leaned forward. A consultant with no significant balance sheet is financing a public company? North Star is not public, Eveline said. The principle remains. This is not institutional capital. It is emotional capital. Dominic looked at Caleb, a personal relationship disguised as financing. The room tightened. Caleb did not answer. Eveline did. Mr. Rowan's note pays 12% if the pilot meets occupancy targets and converts to ordinary fees if it does not. The terms are less favorable to North Star than bank debt and more favorable than Belgrave's proposed liquidation of assets. The only emotion in the agreement is his confidence in work your advisors said was impossible. Dominic opened a folder. Then perhaps we should discuss why that confidence appeared after he and his daughter spent Christmas in your home. Miriam interrupted. The conflict disclosure has been reviewed. Eveline abstained from negotiating Rowan's note. I did. The Independent Compensation Committee approved the terms this morning. Dominic turned toward her. You approved this? I approved a commercially defensible instrument. You told me yesterday you intended to support the sale. Yesterday, I had not reviewed the final pilot contracts. She distributed copies. 3 rehabilitation networks had signed letters committing to refer families and reserve blocks of suites if the Bellwether opened on schedule. The projected first-year occupancy exceeded North Star's average. The numbers changed. Samuel Klein requested a recess. Eveline refused. Your proposal has been available for 6 weeks. Ours has been available since dawn. You may read while we continue. Dominic's concern finally lost its velvet. This is reckless. You are risking the company because a contractor told you a sentimental story about old buildings. No, Eveline said. I am refusing to sell because the company has a profitable path forward that preserves its assets and serves an ignored market. You cannot separate this plan from him. I do not need to. The board hires people for judgment. Caleb's judgment created value. Your judgment dismissed it. He is using you. The words entered the room and struck something older than the meeting. Eveline looked at her uncle. That is what you told me about every person I trusted after the accident. The therapists wanted publicity. The executives wanted control. The staff wanted money. My friends wanted access. You taught me suspicion until you were the only person left close enough to make decisions for me. Dominic's face went pale. I protected you. You isolated me. Your fiancé sold private medical details to the press. Your board tried to remove you. You stopped eating. You refused therapy. Someone had to take control. Temporarily,